Hey, welcome to the Not Special Show. My name is Brian Shotwell, and I figured that I should probably come on here and actually introduce myself because I just randomly threw up a podcast episode and started it. And if you are some of the, dozen or so people that listen to it, you're like, what am I even listening to? And who is this guy? I was barefoot and half shirtless in the episode with Michael Murphy, which was really cool. But here we are. This is a studio that my wife generously basically made for my podcast to start and her podcast about mental health to start. And we're here in her office here in Dallas, Texas. And it's been really cool. I feel like this is a big season, as church people call it, a big time in our lives for everybody else that's not church people. But it's cool because our word that we've kind of been given, you can say God or the universe or the spirit or, fill in the blank for 2023, whatever people on Instagram are saying. I believe it's God. Gave us the word expansion. So this is part of our expansion. This is putting ourselves out there in the world and not being too awfully terrified on what comes of it, and not being attached to the results of it because we think that this is what we're supposed to be doing. And so we're just going to do it. A big expansion for me, if you don't know, I wrote a book and it has been published now for a month exactly, almost. Today's, I think, the 22nd, and it was published on August 21st, my birthday. So it's been a month and it's been cool. It has been super cool. We'll talk about some feelings that I've had about that, but I was very prepared for those feelings, and I was okay with whatever feelings did come up, whether they be positive feelings or negative feelings. I rode the wave of them all, and it's still kind of a wave that I'm riding. But let's back up. I'm what's called a lounge lord, a self proclaimed lounge lord. I am a stay at home dad, full time stay at home dad. And on top of that, I homeschool my almost 7-year-old daughter. We have a newborn at home too. So the whole point of this podcast, will back up a little bit, is to kind of give you a little sneak peek into my crazy brain, what it's like being a stay at home dad, what it's like not bringing in any money to the family. So, and just, yeah, all of my crazy stuff that I find interesting, all of the people that I like talking to, all of the topics that I like talking about with those people, we're going to do on this podcast. So, back to me, Slay King. Stay at home dad. My wife and I have been married about 12 years now. And the stay at home dad thing, my wife and I had always wanted to homeschool our kids. I don't know if always, but the pandemic and kind of pushed us that way a little bit because, all parents, and this is true of all kids are special. We believe that our daughter deserves a little bit something greater than public school, what the public school system offers. So we tried to get her into a private school here in Dallas named Hockaday. You may have heard of it. It's actually really cool all girls school that kind of empowers girls to go on to do big things. That was during the pandemic, and we got put on a wait list, and that was just like a sign for us of just like, okay, let's go all in. Let's figure out how to homeschool her. And my wife had just started her own private counseling practice, and it was going really well. And I was still trying to do some personal training stuff on the side and kind of contribute. I did really enjoy it, but that was our sign of just like, let's just go all in. And it took me 2 years, 2.5, to fully accept the stay-at-home dad role. It was just a hard mental switch, as a guy, as a man. I'm a man, and I'm almost 40. No joke there. It's just, we're wired to believe that the man is the breadwinner. And I wasn't going to be the breadwinner anymore. I was going to be a stay-at-home dad. So it took me a while to kind of get there and believe in myself, really. But we did, and it's awesome. And I say all that to say that it was awesome. Back to the book. Awesome to have the opportunity to show my daughter all the hard work that something takes, that all the creative things that go into writing a book, and getting to see the fruits of your hard work and your creativity and all of that stuff in like an actual book form, which is super cool to see. And it honestly melts my heart to hear her talk about this book, and whenever she is holding it and showing her friends. And if you didn't listen to the podcast of her and I, like, you can hear it in her voice, like she is proud of me. And I think that that's just like the coolest thing. If that was the only thing that we got out of homeschooling, like, that's it. She saw one of her parents, and we'll get to what she sees from my wife Jen on a daily basis, is dad wanted to do something, dad had an idea, dad stuck with that idea and saw it through to the end, and we get to like be super stoked about it. That's been really cool to see. So yeah, it's been a month of the book, and the book started. This goes along with our expansion that my wife and I are on. The book started, I wouldn't call it a book, but the idea of the book started probably about 2 years ago. And that was just me. I've been out of the Army 10 years, 11 years now. So it was like coming up on the 10-year mark. And I'd just done this, shot a video with my now good friend, Nick Lavery. I have this YouTube channel where I interview veterans and let them basically like tell their story. It's super cool, highly produced. It's awesome. You should check it out. It's called The Hive Veteran Stories. But, I was, driving him around to our production studio, and we were just talking, getting to know each other. We hadn't really talked before that. He had just agreed kind of on a whim to come out and do it, tell a story. And he was just asking about my military experience. And if you don't know Nick Lavery, he is the first amputee special forces operator to go back into combat. So he's a badass, right? Like, he's written a book now about kind of a little bit of a story, but mainly about the mindset of how he got like leg off, I want to go back to war. And it kind of took me back that he actually cared to know my story in the military. And I was open enough to actually tell him like the actual truth, because I think it's easy for a lot of us, if we're next to someone that we look up to and admire, and their story may seem like better than ours, it's easy for us to downplay our own story or maybe embellish the truth a little bit. Right. The funny joke is, man, it's hot in here. Note to self, like, actually plug that fan in. But the joke is, there was only 500 Green Berets in Vietnam. I've met all 20,000 of them, right? So you get the joke. Like, especially in today's society, I think we all, military guys and gals, maybe want to embellish our story and maybe tell some stories that we didn't actually go through, maybe. And so I was not in combat. That's the whole point of the book. I wasn't in a special forces unit. That was kind of the whole point of the book. I was a regular Army guy that didn't deploy. And so I was just telling him all this crazy stuff, and he was dying laughing. Like, I was like, what is going on? Like, this dude actually cares. And then he got serious for a second, and he said that, like, everybody's story matters. That story needs to be told. Regular military, Army, Marines, Navy, Coast Guard, I guess, Air Force, now Space Force, just the regular people were his heroes. He said that it takes a lot to just sign on the dotted line one way or another. Just because he has a special forces designation, he did not see himself and does not see himself as any better than anyone, and especially not better than anyone in the military. So that kind of, looking back, kickstarted the whole process of writing my book. And at first, 2 years ago, I had a supplement company, and that's going to play into all of this. That was me trying to transition into being a full-time stay-at-home dad, but I was still holding on to the belief that, like, I have my own company. Like, this is a big deal. I contribute. No, not really. But so I started writing down, just randomly, these funny stories on what I thought would be funny. And at first, I didn't want it to be a book, in all honesty, because I was in this weird hustle and grind and want to contribute monetarily mindset. I knew that books typically don't make money, right? Chances are. So I was like, no, I want it to be like a screenplay, or I don't know what this thing is going to be. So I'm just going to start writing down some funny stuff from my time in the Army. Well, it was very sporadic. I would get excited about it for, maybe a week at a time and write some every day. I'd be super excited about it, and then I'd move on and forget about it for weeks or maybe a month or even 3 or 4 months at a time. And that goes on for about a year, maybe a year and a half. And I didn't even tell anybody about it. Maybe I told my wife. I started like writing some stuff down. I honestly don't think that I did. Well, flash forward to last October, so October of 2022, I had decided, I was like, I need to go in there and like clean it up, because it was very sporadic. Like, I would write about one story, stop in the middle of it, write about some more, 6 pages later, finish up the first story that I'd started. I want to go in there and clean it up. And I decided, I want to actually be professional about this. I want to sit down and actually write. Whatever this is going to be, I'm just going to write. I hadn't even decided it was a book. Well, I got to that point because I'm a huge fan of Ryan Holiday. If you don't know who Ryan Holiday is, he's the Daily Stoic guy. He's kind of brought Stoicism, this philosophy, back into the modern world through his books. The Obstacle is the Way. He has a daily journal called the Daily Stoic. Ego is the enemy. Stillness is key. Discipline is destiny. I mean, I've read them all multiple times. It's awesome. He puts out great content on YouTube. He does these little clips, just talking head, kind of like this. But he did his whole writing process. It was like a 30-minute long video. And I'm the type of person, I'm an Enneagram 5, which you can look up Enneagram, or you can probably listen to my wife's podcast at some point. She'll talk about it. But an Enneagram 5, I really like to research stuff. I feel the most comfortable whenever I know kind of everything that's going on, everything that possibly is going on, which is, I have now kind of let go of that because it was unhealthy for me to do that. If you're the type of person to like go down YouTube rabbit holes or Google rabbit holes, and like the other day I randomly thought about, like, what do they do at like the atomic bomb? Like, how did that get? And it's just like, so I had like researched, like, how do you write a book? What is the writing process like? You get the classic, you got to just start. You got to just start. I I wanted more though. So sure enough, Ryan Holiday put out this is my whole writing process, and it just like blew my mind because it was so accessible. I thought to myself, he does it on just Google Docs. Well, I was writing on Google Docs. He has an editor that kind of helps him along the way. But I thought to myself, I this feels very manageable to me. And in that video, he says, I don't know who this quote is attributed to. He says that a few crappy pages a day will eventually get you a book. And I paused, ran to the kitchen, got a Sharpie and a note card, and I wrote that down. And I put it next to my screen in my office. And that was it for me. A couple of crappy pages a day get you a book eventually. That blew my mind. That's when I decided the next day I was going to get serious. I was going to clean up all those random stories and I was going to start like almost being a professional. I read that night alone Turning Pro, which is another one of my absolute favorite authors, Stephen Pressfield. It talks about taking yourself serious if you want to fill in the blank, whatever creative thing you want to do. Act like you are professional. Act like you're a Ryan Holiday. Act like you're a whatever painter or graphic designer that you aspire to be. Act like you're them. What would they do? I can tell you that authors don't every 3 months sit and write. That's just called journaling. An author sits down every day and writes words up to a certain amount, probably. They have a goal. And they're professionals about it. Like, what does a professional, counselor do in my wife's instance? She comes into the office, she sits down, she's researching new things, new methods, and she sits down at her desk and she does her work. So I decided that's what I was going to do the very next day. That day was August the 6th of 2022. Yeah. So almost a year ago. The next morning I woke up, I even told my wife, I was like, hey, I'm gonna write a book about my time in the military. And she was stoked, which is so awesome. If you know that like love and support from a spouse or a loved one, like it feels so good. It's like I don't technically need your approval to do this, but like it just feels good. And so we get her off to work, and we at the time did what's called princess nap time. That's just kind of like alone time, nap time for my daughter if she wants it. And I go into my office. I got Ryan Holiday's creative process in my mind. I got my little note card, and I go to log into my Google Docs, and I can't get in. Okay, no big deal. Don't know why I can't get in, but try again. Reset my password, get in there, and there is nothing, zilch, nada in my Google Docs, in my drive at all, nothing. And this was the Google Drive and Google Docs that I was using under the supplement company that we had just disbanded, stopped doing that. Well, and now it's disappeared. Rest in peace, Honeybeard. There's nothing in my Google Drive, which is what was holding on to the 35,000 words that I had been messing around with over the course of a year of my military experience. Oh, back up. My wife is super excited about me writing this military experience book and thing because she had encouraged me every time I went to like film one of those YouTube videos for my series. She would always be like, when are you going to get in the chair and like tell your story? And I'd always downplayed it. I was the opposite and was just like, nobody wants to hear it. Whatever. What would I even say? Like one of those, like, please don't ask me again type deals. So she was stoked that I was actually going to be doing it just in a written form. And fast forward to the next day, I'm staring at my desk and trying for the life of me to figure out how to recover a Google Doc. I was Googling it. If you've ever had a problem with Google or Google Docs or anything, they are 0% help. If you need help, I couldn't find an email, help at Google. They were like, it could be weeks, maybe if we get back to you. Use this chatbot. Chatbots are 0% helpful to me in this time. Turns out that when we shut down the supplement company Honeybeard, which was what I was using Google Docs for, you know where this is going. When you turn that website off, you turn off like your G Suite, which is the Google service that runs like your and then your company name email, which is what you sign into for Google Drive and Google Docs and Google Sheets and all of that. And that was just gone. It was gone forever, gone. 35,000 words. I think I went outside and just let myself fall into the pool and screamed underwater. Could not believe it. 35,000 words. And I let myself feel that emotion. I was not trying to just like snap out of it immediately. Like I needed to feel that. I needed to feel the burn. But I decided this is what I am called to do right now. I'm going to do it. Start over, blank slate, start a whole new email, a whole new Google Docs, one that's not attached to a business. Tomorrow we start. Next day, show up at the desk, ready to go. I just start. Ryan Holiday talks about having a goal word count for the day. And I started super conservative that first day. And I'd also talked to Nick Lavery. He had wrote his book, Objective Secure. And he talked about like his goal was like 300 words a day. If he could get that, like awesome. And then he would hammer down on the weekends and double down and just blast it. So, okay, 300 words today. And I started blank tab. I think I didn't even write chapter 1. And I just started going. And that 300 words turned into 500 words. And I found that 500 words that I was still craving to actually write more. Like there was more in my head to write that day. So I bumped it to 1,000 words a day. And that's where I stayed for the whole book. And the ideas, some of them were already in my head. So if you haven't read the book already, it's like separate stories, basically chronologically from the time right before I raised my right hand and like swear into the military. And it like takes you through basic training and my one and only unit in Germany, just crazy stories along the way. They take you through that. And so I had some of those stories sporadically, but during the lead up to, me deciding I'm going to actually write this, I would go on these morning walks where it was just me. Everybody was sleeping at the house. I would walk around our neighborhood, which is funny because it's a very quiet neighborhood here in a suburb. And I typically would not have a shirt on. I would be barefoot and I would just be like dazed off thinking. And that was when these more stories would just come to me. And that's when I knew I need to be writing this. This is what I need to be doing because these stories would just come to me and I would have my phone out of notes ready to go. Stories would just come to me, boom, type them out. And then I would walk a little bit more of that story. Like, oh, you should tell that part of that story. Boom, type it out. And then when it was time for me to write, I would go in there and write it all out. And it would automatically come to me as I was typing out what I'd already thought of more and more and more and more. And I just went chronologically. It really did. Losing those words, 35,000 words, probably made me actually write the book because I probably just would have fucked around and sporadically written and then messed around some more and 2 years later maybe actually put them in order and then you know what it's like. We've all been there with projects around the house or creative things or maybe a book that you're working on. And so it made me actually turn pro, as Stephen Presswood will say. And so yeah, I started from the very beginning and my process was straight through to the end. And I would randomly have a thought of like, hey, you need to tell make that a little bit beefier, that one part. And so I would go back and that would be part of my 1,000 words or 500 words, wherever I was at for the day. And 6 days a week, I did that no matter where we were. We took a couple of trips during that time, and I would do it during nap time or do it at nighttime. Once you're in the rhythm of doing something and it's become part of what you do, it you kind of get better at it. And that's a weird thing to say, like better at writing. How is that even a thing? But I think you're the muse, and wherever you think your creative thing is coming from, like your ideas, your brain is just open to them. It knows, okay, that laptop or that iPad or whatever your writing method is gets pulled out. Like, let's open up that brain, ideas come in, boom, straight to the fingers. That's how I work and operate. You know, being open to ideas, no matter what time it is or when, that is very important. So I always had, like, my notes on my phone have been just worn out. There's multiple scrolls and multiple notes on different books that I'm, working on. And then there's notebooks, and just as you're writing stuff down about, the next 10 pages from now, a month from now, write about this in the story. And that's what works for me. Some people, maybe have to sit and think, what am I going to write about? But that like hurts my brain to think about, like straining on what to write about. I'm a very free flowing writer. But, starting whatever day I just said, October the 6th, it took me, well, I'll say 6 days a week, 6 months to actually write the thing, maybe 5 months. And this is where I learned 5 months. We'll call it 4 months. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do now? And then that goes into the editing and all of that, which we'll get into later. My wife edited it. Spoiler alert. That was, I thought was going to be hard, but it actually wasn't. We worked really well together. I was terrified at first, just giving your little baby that you wrote to someone else, but it turned out great because she's the person that I can trust the most in this world. And so I trusted her, and it turned out great. And it's been awesome. Being a self published has its ups and downs, but nobody can take away what I actually wrote. Well, stories are true, and I don't want to have to cut some out. I think they're all important. And I think they're all important because we live in a time, and you can blame social media or whatever you want, where, how do I be careful with my words here, because I don't want to downplay what anybody has done in their lives, much less the military, because I just don't. I think it's all important. The special forces guys have gotten a lot of attention over the past 10, 15 years, 2 wars, all these crazy heroic stories that come out of them, killing bin Laden and all of these like, it's amazing stuff. But we've kind of heard it all. Like, that's weird to say because they're all awesome, like I said. And I love hearing them all. I still love hearing them all. It's like, give me something fresh, dude. Freshen me up. So that's where, not special, the name of my book, where it comes in. Because it's just silly. It's funny stories of just a regular dude in the regular army, nothing special. I used a mop more than I did a gun. Just funny stories. So I hope it like brings a little breath of fresh air. And also, on a serious note, I hope that it allows people to that read it or watch one of these videos or whatever. I hope it allows them to be themselves and be okay with whatever they did in the military. If you mop floors and you peeled potatoes, whatever it is, that's awesome because I know that you had a good time and I know you had shitty times and I think that it's awesome. And I think that you should talk to your people, your loved ones, your friends and family. I think you should tell them your story more. I want to hear it more because it's probably ridiculous, which is what these stories are. They're absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, and it kind of pokes fun at where I was even 5 years ago and, you know, wanting to still be this like badass special forces dude, letting people believe that I was maybe some special forces stuff in the army. I didn't tell them that I did. I just let them believe it. Like, look at me. Well, the way that I'm dressed now, but yeah, like, let's stop pretending. Go back to the joke. There was only 500 Green Berets in Vietnam, and I've met all 20,000 of them. Again, I'm going to be very careful. Enough with the Predator stickers on our trucks. Enough with the, certain military apparel that we still wear. And enough. Like, that's not you. At least it wasn't me. I never did kind of gravitate towards that. And maybe you do, and it makes you feel good and it makes you feel like a badass. I want you to feel that, but I also want you to know that it's okay to be truthful with yourself and honest with those people around you. Because guess what? They're still going to support you. I've felt more support now that I've talked about like the real stuff that I went through than, ever before. So if you notice on the book, of course I forgot it. On the book, there's a smiley face melting over a um, a predator, not predator, Punisher logo. So if you don't know what the Punisher logo is all about, it's like this. I think it was probably made famous in the military with Chris Kyle, American Sniper. His elite Navy SEAL unit used it as like their like mascot. Cool. Your Punishers love it. But now people that have no affiliation with that unit or did any of that stuff, like use it as stickers on the back of their truck and like wearing it on t-shirts and all this crazy stuff. And so that logo that you see on my book is a direct troll and a direct like shot at that. Just like, come on, like let's smile and be funny and silly instead of like so serious. Why so serious? And so that is part of my like branding around the book. And I hope you like it. And I hope you get it. I don't want to offend anybody that is special forces or does love just having a nice Punisher logo on their truck. But I hope everybody lightens up about it. And so, yeah, back to what this podcast is going to be and this show is going to be. I'm going to talk about just whatever I want to talk about. But I think it's important to talk about some serious stuff. So, like our first episode that I just dropped on everybody, dropped to the world, all 0 of you that have watched it on YouTube, fingers crossed. Like, I talked to a therapist that works with my wife, and I just like hearing people's perspective of their life. Like, I didn't know that he lived in 10 different cities by the time he was 10, type stuff. Like, that is cool. He was an addict, he was a school teacher, then he worked at Starbucks, and he became a therapist. And I think that's really cool. And I think all of us have stories like that. And I want to talk to a lot of people. So we're going to do that. Like I had my daughter on. And I think it's just really cool to watch her be so excited about something. And so, yeah, we're going to talk about what being a lounge lord is and what homeschooling your kid is with a newborn. Yeah. Oh, I like going to Miami a lot and eating Cuban food with my wife. It's just awesome stuff. So, thanks for tuning in. like it, share it, subscribe it. And I hope this also serves as an encouragement to, if you want to do something, just fucking do it. Like, who cares that there is millions and millions of other podcasts out there? It's not my podcast, though. I want to have a podcast. I want to talk to people. I want to empower myself and I want to empower other people. So I'm going to do that. Okay, now I'm actually going to say bye because I'm going to go write um, one of the many books that I've been working on. So, bye bye.